welcome to another episode of Iconic Freedom, the Formula. We are setting the standard for accountability and responsibility, the ownership of your choices and the consequences for those choices. Let each care for self, and all will be cared for.
Wait, you're not Gabby.
And you're not Karl Marx.
No, Ginger Witch. It is Adam Smith, one of the greatest minds of the Industrial Revolution.
Look, buddy, I don't have time for chit-chat. I just need some knowledge about how to stop my friends from being so selfish.
Oh, wow. What's going on with them? Are they stealing from you? Harming you? Unfairly ruining your endeavors?
Hey, that sounds like you, Corinne.
No, my friends don't do that, but they're always looking out for number two. Themselves, I'm number one. And I just think they should put me first more often, you know?
Aye, it sounds like these friends have self-interest. I say leave them to it. It's not a flaw for people to prioritize their own wants and needs. You know, in a free market, other people's self-interest just might help you too. I call self-interest the invisible hand.
This all sounds very made up.
Let's get a second opinion.
You've definitely convinced us to question what we hear. How do we find the truth?
You have to do your research. Let's put it this way. Say you stumble upon a car accident. How would you find out who was at fault?
I'd ask the drivers who hit who.
Seems logical, but what if she says he caused it and he says she caused it? Whoever's at fault is going to owe a lot of money. So they both have motivation to lie.
I'd ask people who witnessed the crash.
Exactly. But the people who witnessed the crash saw different details. And some might even misremember something important, like which driver had the green light.
We could check to see if the crash was caught on camera.
Excellent. Hard evidence to back up the claim. That's very important. What you're doing is collecting as much information as possible from as many sources as you can, and not just sources that confirm what you already believe. Remember, question all you hear. Critical thinking makes it clear.
This was very helpful, Mr. Wax President Kennedy.
Any other helpful tips we should know?
Be a truth teller. Once you learn the truth, speak the truth. Also, convertibles are super overrated.
One of the things that I always really enjoy about the exploration of doing these podcasts is how things are going to be inspiring. And a friend of mine, Dan, whose birthday is this weekend, happy birthday, Dan, sent me these videos, and I just thought they were so funny. First of all, I thought they were very funny. They're very clever. This guy actually has a channel on Instagram. The channel is called Tuttle Twins TV. I put a link down below so you could see it and check it out. I always thought it was kind of fun when, you know, they can be playful with these kinds of subjects. And especially this one, I thought how interesting that a couple of subjects that we've talked about on the podcast, that they use a different approach, right? They're doing cartoons, but these are great things to also teach your kids, right? Because that's where all of this starts from. When we teach our children the value and the qualities of being accountable, taking ownership of their choices, and being responsible to those choices, and then being responsible to the outcomes of however those choices manifest themselves. Super important for life. I mean, they really are building blocks, when you think about it, for being able to navigate the rest of your life, and to not navigate your life through victimization, but through and not that I really like this word, the empowerment of making your choices and owning those choices and realizing I'm making a choice. One of the things that I thought was kind of interesting, this is in my own discovery, was that when I had that epiphany all those years ago, actually it was just about 20 years ago, when I was in New York and I was walking around Battery Park, and I just talked to a friend of mine, and all of a sudden it just clicked in my head that I'm making a choice. And you think it's probably, like, well, no duh, you're making a choice. But it's not necessary until you start assimilating and integrating the idea. You're not realizing that you are making a choice. and that you're making choice with intention. And when we look at that first cartoon, you're making choice out of self-interest, the motivation. And it was in that discovery for myself and realizing when I started to break it all down, and I did. I talked to my friends about this, probably to the point where they got sick of talking about it. But I started examining my own choices and asking myself, well, what is it that I wanted? What is it that I wanted that I made that choice for? What did I make that choice for? What did I make that choice for? And I would keep exploring it. And it was in the breakdown of all of that, in self-interest, of understanding motivation. And I hypothesize, I still do to this day, that we make choice out of the self-interest to do what? It all boils down to we want to feel good. We want to be comfortable. However you want to express that thought, we want to be comfortable, we want to feel good. And when you start examining, if you walk back your choices, if you go to the supply chain, where does it all start from? Every choice that you make starts from wanting to feel good. You want to be comfortable. And if you look back at every choice you make, the choice of what food do you want to eat, what exercise you want to do, how do you want to spend your money, how do you want to earn your money, what kind of relationships do you want to be in, what is it that happens for you emotionally in your relationships, what are the things that thwart your relationships or your job, how is it that you're interacting with your own universe, with the world around you. All of these things are motivated by one thing: wanting to feel good, wanting to be comfortable. And what became interesting for me, and hopefully in your own exploration you find this as well, is that you're not necessarily understanding in the moment that that's why I want to feel good. You're just thinking, I'm trying to get something done. And I'm trying to achieve a goal. Right, you're always trying to achieve a goal. What is the goal you're trying to achieve? And I think a lot of times what happens is we get caught up in the outcome, right? Because here we go again. What is the self-interest? The self-interest is an outcome. Well, if you get attached to an outcome, then what happens? Well, then you start making choices to manipulate and control something because you want it to look and feel a particular way. And then where does it go from there? And, what won't you do in order to be able to bring forth an idea, or, to buy a house or buy a car or be in a relationship or interact with someone or, make a sale? I mean, what won't you do in life if you like someone or dislike someone at your job, in your family? I mean, everywhere you go, all of these things are happening all at once. They're all happening simultaneously when you think about it. When you break it down and you start looking at each thing, and the reason to do this exercise, in my mind, I think, is because you start to understand the mechanics of it. And if you can, then what happens is you develop the ability to move to a place where you're just doing it, you're just living it. You no longer have to think about it because you already know, are my choices being made with accountability? Am I taking ownership of the choice? And am I making the choice with responsibility to the outcome? That I know I can respond to whatever the outcome is, and that I can look at the outcome and the variables. This could happen, this could happen, or that could happen. I mean, you kind of start walking through the process for yourself. And then you realize in that moment, this is the choice I'm going to make. And I'm going to be okay with that choice, whatever the outcome is. But you have to also be able to be honest with yourself and not be in delusion and not try to fake yourself out and, try to play this game of, well, I'm going to act like I'm not attached to the outcome, but then if the outcome doesn't go the way I want, I'm going to get mad. Well, obviously, you're just playing a game with yourself, right? You're gaming yourself rather than being honest with yourself and getting clear and clean and bringing order to your life. So, as I'm talking about these things, you're kind of getting the sense of the subjects that we talk about, how they all come together at some point. And it starts with this process. And this sometimes can be a challenge for people. I would posit to you that 99.9% of the time is a challenge to people because they haven't thought of it before and they haven't considered it before. They're just out kind of doing and trying to get through things. But when you take a step back and you start to live your life with intention, you start to make choices more conscientiously, that you're not whimsically running around doing whatever and not paying attention and then, acting like you're a victim to something. Like the movie, Dangerous Minds, there are no victims, right? There's only the self-inflicted victimization of making a choice and not being responsible and accountable for that choice, and then getting upset because people don't do what it is that you want them to do. But like the first cartoon, everybody's self-interest. It's the invisible hand of self-interest, and everybody has it. And I thought one of the great videos that helped me understand that even more was when I was listening to Milton Friedman, and he was talking about self-interest. He was talking about financial, but it occurred to me in that moment that financial is not just that aspect of life, but of all of life, and the cross-application of it everywhere. Everything you do is motivated self-interest of the desire to do what? To feel good. At the end of the day, to lay your head down and say, that felt good. I liked what I did. Even the people that, remarkably, that you might see in your life that are miserable people, they're happy to be miserable. I remember my mother saying that about my grandmother and members of her family, is that, they weren't happy unless they were miserable. And when you're growing up, you hear your mom say something like that. You're like, whatever, what the hell does that mean? But as I got older, and then especially in this exploration, I understood it. That some people just like to be unhappy. They like to be a victim at their own hand. And that's the only time that they feel good, that they are feeling bad. Not a place I want to be, and I'm certainly thinking, if you're listening to this podcast, not a place you want to be. But if you're able to break this down, if you're able to go through this next week, take a day, take an hour, whatever it is, and start just evaluating. Ask yourself everything that you do, and literally this is what I did. Every choice that I would make, and I must have done it for I don't know how long, I would make a choice to go do something and ask myself, what did you make that choice for? I made it because I was hungry. What did you make the choice for that food? That's what my mouth was watering for, or what's going on that I wanted to choose that instead of something else? Am I making the choice to put something in my mouth, to eat something that I know is not good for me because I'm having an emotion about something? And then we start going down the road of the emotions, right? We've talked about that, right? Just recently, how emotions are there to indicate something to you, not a place to live. And so then all of these things will start exposing themselves to you. Your consciousness will start to reveal to you the information that you can integrate so that you can move yourself closer and closer to your own health and well-being, a mindful, healthful place where you can see reality. Reality is the observation of life without emotion, but you can't get there if you are mired in emotion, that you lack the accountability of your choices and the responsibility of the outcomes of those choices. You have to be able to look at it, own it, pay attention to it, and then understand, listen, with my choices, I'm moving towards something or I'm moving away from it. I thought that the cartoon about the misinformation was kind of fun because, ad nauseum, we hear about misinformation, disinformation. But what I thought was interesting was it talked about the exploration, to explore the details of something, to figure it out, to look at it from different angles, and to find out, where do I get the information in order to see the reality, to see the truth. And a lot of times, and especially for ourselves, the only way that's going to happen is when you do it and you're willing to not game yourself and play games with the reality and the choices that you're making, but you're honest with yourself and you say, I'm making this choice because of X, Y, and Z. You can game yourself, you can play games and tell yourself whatever it is you want to tell yourself when you're in a particular situation trying to manipulate the outcome. But the fun thing is, the word that I love is reality. Reality will always expose itself. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, that the contradiction of reality will make reality surface. So what does that mean? It means that no matter how much you try to manipulate an outcome, the reality cannot live in the contradiction of what is accurate. And it will find a way to reveal itself. It will find a way to expose itself. You can't hide, basically. Reality is, the song, every breath you take, every move you make, I'm watching you. And that's what reality is doing. It's watching you, and it's acting on the choices that you're making. And so what's interesting is when you start to pull all these things together and you start to see the path, you start to see the supply chain, it all starts to make sense. And I've often described it to people as playing solitaire on the computer. I just kept turning over another card. I turned over the card of accountability. I turned over the card of responsibility. I turned over the card of self-interest. I turned over the card of motivation. I turned over the card of motivation in terms of gaming myself or manipulation. I turned over the card of trying to control things through self-interest. And at some point, they all just kind of went into place. And if you've played solitaire on the computer, you know how this looks. It's like all of a sudden the right card turns over, you choose the right one, and then boom, it all goes into place, and it all stacks up, and it all makes sense. But it takes time. If you think about how nature changes, it changes over time. It's not something that happens immediate, and then you just give yourself some grace. And when you realize, okay, probably should not have done that, but that's just trial and error, so then try it a different way. And I would say to you, in all of your choices, that you seek to do no harm to yourself or to others. And when you're at a point where it all kind of synergizes, synthesis, that it all kind of comes together, you start to realize the simplicity of life. As complicated as all these things sound, all of a sudden you start to realize the simplicity of life is, I make a choice, I'm conscious of the choice. I would not make a choice that did not reflect accountability. I would not make a choice that does not reflect my responsibility of the outcome. I would not make a choice that would do harm to myself or to others. And when you reach that place at some point, like breathing and blinking and, walking, you start to do these things without thinking about them. And that's where your integrity and your character surface, the reality of integrity and character become obvious to you. And when it's obvious to you, it will be obvious to others. So much more to talk about, but our time has come to an end for this weekend. Thank you so much for joining me. Hey, listen, hit that like button if you would. Share it with your family and friends. You never know how it might help them in their endeavor on their path in this life. All these great links are down below. Check those out. Check out the Tuttle Tunes and all that fun stuff on Instagram. And I will see you next week. Let each care for self, and all will be cared for.